Please join me in welcoming Chris de la Puente, who is the chairman of LVMH Beauty and Fragrance and the CEO of Sephora, and Alison Kirkby, who's the CEO of Telia in Sweden, who's now ranked the #1 female CEO in Sweden. Chris was the general manager in Brooklyn's Health and Beauty Care. Alison was the FD. They were sponsee. And I'm going to kick you off with a question and then let you have this conversation with each other. Alison, do you agree that sponsorship is important for CEOs, especially women? And if so, could you maybe share with us the difference that Chris's sponsorship made to you in your career?
Yeah, great to see you, Chris. I see you're still dyeing your hair there. That's fantastic. The hair care business still stays with you.
Fortunately, I can't grow it.
Listen, if it wasn't for Chris and other people in my life, I don't think I would be where I am today. And clearly, you know, what Chris did was we worked out when we caught up 2 days ago that it was 20 years ago when I was in my early 30s. That he spotted this young, rough Glaswegian finance person in the P&G organization and gave me a chance to be his FD, following the footsteps of many grey-haired Scottish men that had gone before me, Chris. And if you recall, I did become the first Western European homegrown P&G finance director. And really, what Chris did is he gave me an opportunity. But then what he really taught me and helped sponsor and support me through my time working with him was he encouraged me to move out of my comfort zone. You know, we all know that we were blessed with great leaders at P&G, and leaders like Chris really valued not just growing your business, but growing the people that were in your organization so that they could contribute to the business beyond their legacy. And so Chris, he pushed me out of my comfort zone. I still have in my attic the piece of paper he gave me on my 3rd performance review that said how to be an inspirational leader. And I pull it out every now and again. And he really spent time trying to work out what are the strengths and weaknesses beyond the functional leadership that you brought to the team at P&G. And I think that's what allowed me to extend beyond being a CFO, because Chris could see that there was more to me than just being a CFO, and I had aspirations to go beyond that. So I think, you know, the things that Chris as a sponsor of me did was push me out my comfort zone, look at what else I could bring to the table, really encourage this team spirit of together everyone achieves more. And he really saw diversity in its broadest sense as well. It wasn't just about the gender piece, and that went on at a later time in our career when Chris put me in to run the Wella UK and Irish business, and that was my first chance to be a general manager coming straight out of finance, and was my excuse to get justified to become a CEO at a later stage. So that's my initial stories of Chris, but I could go on, but I'm sure you all want to hear from him now.
Hi, well, good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see a lot of faces that I haven't seen for a while. I think it's almost 12 years since I left P&G, and it's wonderful to see so many wonderful faces. Look, the story on Alison was very simple, which is I had the privilege and honor of taking over the UK after Paul and Louisa and many others. And we were going through a major reorganization change. And Peter Morris, who was a brilliant CFO at the time, said he wanted to retire in 2000. And we had to pick a new CFO. And so it was, I think you all know, P&G UK was a pretty big business, pretty complex. And the start point was everyone said, well, we need to have someone that's been a proven CFO, international experience, et cetera, et cetera. And I got to see Alison working for Peter. I thought she was bloody brilliant, smart, worked extremely hard, fantastic balance, EQ, IQ, got things done. And I said, why not Alison? I think she was about 35 at the time, or early 30s. But I believed in her. I thought she was fantastic. And she was a role model to the culture that we wanted to create. And so I was prepared to bet on her and help her. And she was fantastic. And I remember we used to do town hall meetings where we'd present the results to everyone. And after a few of these, people used to say to me, wouldn't it be great if other members of the team stood up and presented what's going on? And I asked Alison to do it. And the first time she was a bit nervous presenting in front of the whole organization. By the second and third time, she was so fantastic that she did it without notes. And she was even much better than I was and everyone else. And so she just kept on growing. And every time I would ask her or challenge her to do more, she was up for it. And it's extremely satisfying when you make bets on people and they're hungry to learn and they take on board the feedback and you just watch them fly. And so we don't see so much of each other, but I think it's fantastic how Alison just keeps on growing and growing and growing. And she becomes a role model for a lot of other young women that want to run companies, and why shouldn't they?
And Chris, have you carried on doing that in your career? Because you were, clearly Procter & Gamble really encouraged us to develop our teams below us. And you were a fabulous sponsor, I'm sure, not just to me, but to many others. What I thought was great about you when you were still at P&G, you continued to sponsor me even beyond the time I was your CFO. You encouraged me to take on a role in investor relations, working between Cincinnati and Europe, so that I could develop my corporate finance skills. And then you spotted the chance that you needed somebody that could understand the hairdressers when you were running Wella, and actually have the right mix of IQ and EQ to handle the British hairdressing industry. Is that something you've continued to do?
I think Paul said it very well. I mean, we don't do this for money. We don't do it for promotion. We do it because we believe it's the right thing. And when you're passionate about it, it just becomes a way of life. It's part of the culture. So I arrived at Sephora 10 years ago, a pretty large organization, a lot of women in the stores and at middle management levels. But when you look at the top 100, there are only about a third of the total population that were women. The leadership team, there's only one or two women. And after 10 years, 2/3 of the whole organization, of the whole leadership team are women. The board is 50-50. And it's taken a long time to get there, but it's pretty deliberate. And we go after it, we make it happen. We spot my president of Asia was the merchant in China, chief merchant. I felt she had the potential to go further. So after a few years, I put her in charge of Southeast Asia. She did a fantastic job. And then in last summer, we promoted her to president of Asia. I've got lots and lots of examples like that. It takes time, but we get there. I chair LVMH's beauty business. We have 12 CEOs for all the various brands. We're highly decentralized. 5 years ago, only 2 women. Today, there's 8 out of 12 are female leaders, and all doing brilliantly. And when you start getting women and into these key positions, they tend to recruit. They tend to recruit more. They do a better job at building more diverse organizations. So it becomes systemic, and you continue making progress. So it's great fun, and I think we've become a much stronger organization and a more fun organization as well as a result of these actions.
Yeah, I guess it's great that LVMH have you, Chris. When one of the things I realized after I left P&G was there isn't the same support network and sponsorship. And whereas, the leaders in P&G encouraged, supported, they helped you learn from your failures. Once you're out in the big bad world, there aren't the same quality of leaders. And really what I've learned along the way is I've had to choose my bosses, and now I kind of try to choose my chairman as a CEO, because it's very rare that you get the all-rounded leaders that we had at Procter & Gamble. So like yourself, what I do now is I try to spot talent in the organization, female and male, and particularly when I sit on boards now. I sat on the board of Greggs the Bakers and now sit on the board of BT. Both are actually very male-dominated businesses. And sitting as a board director, I very much try and encourage, why are there not more women sitting around the board table here? And when we go through succession planning, really try and ask the CEO, what are they doing to help those women? Because that's what you did for me, and that's what the chairman did for me, that was brave enough to promote me to CEO at Tele2 back 5-6 years ago. And so do you see consistency in people like yourselves that want to sponsor others?
I think it's all over the place. I think that I think all companies are making progress. Unfortunately, it's not as fast as it should be. But it just varies very much by individuals. It's got to be led by the top. It shouldn't be led by HR. It should be led by the leadership team, the business, the CEOs, the general managers. As other people have said, what gets measured gets acted on. Leaders have got to be prepared to take risks. And as you take those calculated risks, go out of your way to help people succeed. I went out of my way to help you, and other people have helped me. But I'd say that, gosh, I don't know, 90% of the risks I've taken on people have worked out. I mean, sometimes I think we underestimate that there's a lot of people with good coaching can get pretty far. If you give them the coaching, they're prepared to learn. We talk a lot about gender diversity today, but I think more could be done on Black and African American diversity. We as LVMH do not do as great a job as should be done there. So we're making progress on gender, on LGBTQI, on Asians, Latinos, but we got to do a much, much better job in markets like the US on driving representation of Black African Americans at the most senior levels. But you just got to get on with it and just do it. It's not rocket science, but you've got to be intentional about it. And you've got to work on changing the culture. Once you get the culture change, things happen much, much faster.
I think you also have to encourage the minority, whether it's a female or a Black American or somebody from a poorer background, just to be brave enough to go for it. I think that's what you encouraged in me. And I think because of my working class background, I've always been a bit braver to do things. But that's the thing I find with a lot of women. They're just not get the confidence to tell their boss, I want your job. And they feel almost embarrassed to say that. And I think that's those of us that are here and have been brave enough need to encourage them to just say, don't say no to opportunities. Like you got me the role in Cincinnati when I was 6 months pregnant with Jasper, and they wanted me to go there for 6 months for my onboarding. And I said, I can't come to Cincinnati for 6 months with a baby and leave a 6-year-old at home. But I was brave enough to say, I'll come for a month, but I'll bring the baby and I'll bring my mum with me too.
I remember.
Yeah. And then when I got the opportunity to go to Sweden my aspiration was to be the CFO of a listed company. And I had the opportunity to be either CFO of Talk Talk in Shepherd's Bush in London or the CFO of Tele2 in Stockholm. And all my friends said, well, you got to go to Talk Talk in Shepherd's Bush. And I went, why? And they said, well, because it's in the UK and you can't weekly commute to Sweden. I said, well, Stockholm's much nicer than Shepherd's Bush. And it's a much more interesting job and it will push me much more out of my comfort zone. And so I started a weekly commute by just being a bit braver. And as a result, it led to me then becoming the CEO. So I think that's one thing I really encourage all of those women that I see either in the companies I'm on the board of or those that I still mentor, just take a chance, take a bet, go totally out of your comfort zone and you never know what might happen out of it. But do it in an environment where you feel safe, because we've all had career mistakes and I've had one. Unfortunately, it was working for another woman and she wasn't very supportive. But that taught me to choose my bosses or choose my chairman or choose my companies in the future.
I think what you said very well, Alison, in your case is ask for it. I think a lot of people, they underestimate themselves. A lot of women, and this is a gross generalization, but there's always a sense of the glass is half empty. Am I good enough? And on the other hand, you've got a lot of blokes that have a lot of self-confidence and they talk a good story. And I would just, all the women I work with, I always encourage them, what do you want? What's your dream? What do you want? What would it take to make it come true? And once you're clear about what's, what people want, you can figure out, how can you help them get there? But you need to speak up. The classic example is when you have a board and it's 50-50. What's the share of voice of women versus men? Generally speaking, the share of voice of men is always double what it should be. And women underspeak, or they only speak when they feel they've got something important to say. Or they start speaking and a bloke interrupts them and says the same thing with a sort of a louder, more forceful voice. And so I think it requires women to speak up. It requires people from LGBTQI communities that may feel a little bit insecure to speak up in big forums, to speak up, say what's on your mind. I mean, everyone counts. Everyone is important. And so I think you've always done that very well. And then I think it's fantastic that the way, the chances you've been given, you now inspire others to follow your lead, which is fantastic. And that's how you change the culture. That's why I'm very passionate about working on culture. There's these quotes that in tough times, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I would say in the last year that we've gone through COVID, it's been a disaster for so many people. But our culture at Sephora has been fantastic. The way people have cared for each other, the way people have helped each other. I've been really, really inspired and proud of how people have helped each other because it's been damn tough. But that comes from working on the culture. And hopefully it'll stay like that for many years and it'll continue to grow.
Yeah. And having a leadership team and a board that comes from a very broad set of experiences. It was great listening to Paul earlier on the BT board. The chairman brought on Paul's head of HR onto the board last year. And, there's not many HR professionals sit on UK PLC boards, but Lena just brings a totally different perspective to the financially salesman, the more traditional board director, because she really forces us to think about people and, as you say, culture. And I think that goes back to having a diversity around you that really complements you as an individual. Yeah, for us, Anne, it's easier to do the external recruitment, but actually the ICT sector or the TMT sector is very male dominated. So what we try to do is get into the schools, and show what a telco company really is and explain all of the range of opportunities so that we can then encourage them to go into more scientific, technical type roles at universities. And then, because the more women we can get into ICT interested in university, the more likelihood we then start to have a 50-50 funnel when they start to leave universities. But for us, it does actually start at school.
Yeah, it's a great answer. So here's a question from Anonymous. What does a woman have to do to be spotted? Alison, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Deliver. For me, it was just deliver and be a bloody good employee and a bloody good boss. But and then maybe being Scottish and blonde hair helped as well. I don't know. But
being bolshy.
Yeah, exactly. Just be bold. Stand out. Don't be shy.
Ask for it, as you said.
And actually,
Chris, what do you think?
But the thing
I use an acronym that I don't know where I got from, but I got it years ago, which is PI. P for performance. You got to keep on delivering. Deliver, deliver, deliver. I is image. What's your image? And E is exposure. If you have opportunities, go for them. Go for the opportunities that give you exposure. Work on your image and just deliver. And look, Alison is a fantastic example of what's possible, but there's many others that have broken through. And I think it's fantastic that they then set the culture to change the companies that they lead. I mean, we need to have more female minority leaders leading large companies because they will drive the culture from the top. Now, every time I put a female general manager into China, fantastic woman from Unilever. She's amazing, extraordinary. 3 years later, 90% of my leadership team are women. Now, I think that's we've gone from one extreme to the other. Yeah. But it's fantastic, and our results are extraordinary. They're all Chinese. There's no French. There's no internationals. They're locals. They're hungry like hell, and they are tremendous, and they're doing extraordinary things.
That's
and I think
great.
the other answer is you always stand out when you're in a room of men. In the telco sector, I think there's only 3 female CEOs out of all of the hundreds of telcos globally, which is shocking. So encourage women to go into telco, then they will stand out.
So there's a question here for you, Alison, saying, what are you doing in your telco company to drive change on the gender diversity agenda?
So I've been changing luckily I've taken over as CEO in a company that has been driving the diversity agenda for many years anyway. But for me, as I've been changing my leadership team, again, it all starts at the top. So every role I've been searching for, listening to Chris, I try to get 50-50 candidates, 50-50 internal, 50-50 external, and male, female, and then very much encouraging that the next level down has the right mix of women and the next level down, and just being a role model for them.
So that's
and we have targets. We have targets as well.
Yeah, so it's sort of what measures gets done. And then there's a question here saying allyship. So allyship is quite a modern, it's different from sponsorship. So do either of you have any insights into how allyship fits into this equation and varies across cultures? Chris, what do you say to that?
I don't have too many examples of that, but I became a sort of ally of the LGBTQI drive in the US. We've made great progress on there, and just understanding what are the barriers to progress. And again, I've sponsored quite a few people for senior roles in the US that have those, I don't know what the right label, those tendencies. And we've made good progress. I sponsor a lot of Asians. I don't think we have enough Asian leaders. And many multinational companies are still very Western-led. And in our industries, one of the biggest engines of growth are the Asian consumers. And I think we could do with greater representation of Asian leaders to understand the cultures even better, so you end up with even stronger plans and stronger organizations.
Yeah, great question. Alison, what do you make of allyship?
Yeah, well, I think certainly my head of HR, I very much encourage her to be looking at what are her peers doing in other companies in the region or in our sector as well, so that we can learn from the best of others. I think if you look at alliances in general, we all as women try to go into other women networks to support others and learn from others. I think men, though, honestly, are better at building these alliances and these networks, particularly if you're a working mother as well. You dedicate so much of your time to work and to your children and family. You probably don't put enough time on doing other things outside. And that's something I regret, because I just don't have the capacity.
Yeah, so a great observation. And here's a question from Anna, and maybe Chris, I'll start with you on this one. She's saying, despite gender diversity being high on the radar for most companies, the reality is that most C-level or board level jobs are occupied by men. And on my level, VP, I often find myself the only female in the room full of men, despite me working in a beauty industry. I know that companies mean well and they want to improve gender diversity, but something isn't clicking. Do you have any insight into what these barriers are and how to address them? Chris, you've got to start with you on that.
I sort of answered it in, it just takes a long time to change culture, and you need to get momentum. It's one of the hardest things, is walking into organizations where there's not much diversity, and you just got to, you just make progress one step at a time, but, be focused on it. Don't be put off. Be brave. And when I arrived at Sephora, there were a lot of people who were not happy at all with my culture. There were bets as to how long I was going to last. And a lot of those people disappeared within 3 years. But you've just got to be focused on changing the culture. But it's true, there's not enough progress. And it's been very, very slow. But I'd like to think that we will continue to make progress, but we just need momentum, and we need more role models, and then we need more women in high positions to use their power to make even faster change.
Yeah, that's true. And Alison, what do you think about that?
It starts with the chairman. It starts with the chair of the company. And, you know, I was blessed with the chairman of Greg's really believed in diversity. He couldn't find enough qualified female CFOs. And so he took a bet on me even before I'd become the CFO of a listed company to be his audit chair. And so he started at the board, and then he expected his CEO to do the same. And it was the same when I went to Sweden to Tele2. The chairman wanted a female CFO because he wanted to get diversity. And both of those boards were 50-50 boards. And that puts the pressure on the CEO, that puts the pressure on the management team to start the funnel of development that comes up.
So great answer. A question here, which is saying, well, what if you're not the CEO or a board member? You know, how do you go about finding the kind of sponsorship that the two of you have so enjoyed? You referenced the sponsorship culture at P&G, which I think we all felt. How do you go about creating that kind of culture of sponsorship? Chris, what do you think?
I think, look, it doesn't necessarily always have to start as the chairman of a company. You could start off as a general manager. There's a lot of people on this call. You could be a director leading a department. I remember working with Paul in Spain many, many years ago. He was the general manager, I was the marketing director. We ended up building a really fantastic, diverse marketing organization. I remember going to Turkey, and very male dominated. After 3 years, certainly 2/3 of the marketing department were women. You don't have to wait for the instruction, for permission to come from the top. If you believe in it, you just go for it. And obviously the more senior you are, the more you can change. But I think sometimes it's a bit of an excuse to say, well, the chairman's not going to change. You know, we in LVMH at the board level, we are not as diverse as we should be for whatever reasons, the board of LVMH total, but doesn't stop the various maisons making the progress that they make. You don't have to wait for permission from the top.
So I just want to underscore that with the anecdote I told earlier, Chris, when I was a single mother going through a divorce and had to turn up late for your meeting, and you said, just do it. That had an enormous impact on me. And I paid it forward. And, you know, it really made me wake up to the power of flexible working, the power of people fitting their work around their lives. And you just said, yeah, go for it. So you just did it. And I've been very grateful for that. So that's a great example of that kind of behavior.